Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Go, Hare Bal, Hare Bal. Haribo, Haribo. Jai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada.
Let his scriptures carry Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Hari Vrajaka Charja Sotra Vashi Srimad His Divine Grace Hai Tanara Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Tribe Save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Hari Vrajaka Charja Ashto Tarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindaki Namacharya Shirai Ki Premsakaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sutari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Sri Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopana Shamakund Radha Kun Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumishim Dama Ki Navdip Mayapur Dama Ki Purusham Chatra Talapur Dama Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Go Premanande all glory to somebody's all glory to somebody's all glory to somebody's all glory let us be the Sri Guru and Sri Guranga all glory to the Prabhupada Ki Jai Vishnu Krishna Sabhara Srimad Nrsimha Vishnu Krishna. So just the deities look a beautiful day, yeah? Govardhana is particularly smiling. This outfit they're wearing, this is quite a traditional style. That's what they call Ganga Jamuna because it's got silver and gold together. So if you look at the Ganges and the Jamuna River, they have different colours. So they call this Ganga Jamuna. And there was another style of outfit. The first time they offered this outfit, I think, was in Mumbai when Prabhupada was taking darshan. But there's another style of outfit they offered also there, and it was called Lalita Prasad. And it had these like, I can't remember what they called them, but they were seekers, and that they're sort of like made out of cardboard with, like jari, like you see the crowns sometimes the deities wear. And it came from behind the neck, and it was sort of like a curling kind of thing going down like that. And Prabhupada, he liked it so much, they put it on the first time for Prabhupada, and he liked it so much they put it on 2 days in a row. And Prabhupada really appreciated the beauty of the outfit. Okay, so we're reading This is chapter 22 of the third canto, called The Marriage of Kadava Muni and Devahuti. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. This verse on the board. Amantriya Tang Muni Varam. Amantriya Tang Muni Varam. Amantriya Tang Muni Varam. Anugyata Sahanuga. Anugyata Sahanuga. Anugata Sahanuja. Amantriya Tang Muni Varam. Anugyata Sahanuga. Go to the next page. Prataste Ratam Aruhya. Prataste Ratam Aruhya. Prataste Ratam Aruhya. Sabharya Swa Puram Nripa Sarbharya Swapuram Nripa Sabharya Swapuram Nripa Prataste Ratamaruhya Sabharya Swapuram Nripa Amantriya Tang Munivaram Anugyata Sahanuga Prataste Ratam Aruhya Sabharya Swapurang Nripa Amantriya Tang Munivaram Anugyata Sahanuga Prataste Ratam Aruhya Sabharya Swapurang Nripa And I'll read the next verse. Ubayo Rishikulyaya Saraswatya Surodasha Rishinam Upashantanam Pashan Ashrama Sampada. And transliteration, Amantriya, taking permission to go. Tam, from him. Kardama. Munivaram, from the best of sages. Anugyata, being permitted to leave. It's interesting how that word's composed. Anu means to like, it means different things. It can mean to go, it can mean following. And gyata means knowing. So he's knowing he could go. Saha Anuga, along with his retinue. Prataste, started for. Ratam Aruhya, mounting his chariot. Sabharya, along with his wife. Swapuram, his own capital. Nripa, the emperor. Ubhayo, on both. Rishikulyaya, agreeable to the sages. Saraswatya, of the river Saraswati. Surodasha, the charming banks. Rishinam, of the great sages. Upashantanam, tranquil. Pashyan, seeing. Ashrama Sampada, the prosperity of the beautiful hermitages. Translation. After asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch mounted his chariot with his wife and started for his capital, followed by his retinue. Along the way, he saw the prosperity of the tranquil seers, beautiful hermitages on both the charming banks of the Saraswati, the river so agreeable to saintly persons. Responsively, please. After asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch mounted his chariot with his wife and started for his capital, followed by his retinue. Along the way, he saw the prosperity of the tranquil seers' beautiful hermitages on both the charming banks of the Saraswati, the river so agreeable to saintly persons. This is a short purport. As cities are constructed in the modern age with great engineering and architectural craftsmanship, so in days gone by there were neighborhoods called Rishikulas, where the great saintly persons resided. In India, there are still magnificent places for spiritual understanding. There are many rishis and saintly persons living in nice cottages on the banks of the Ganges and Jamuna for the purpose of spiritual cultivation. While passing through the Rishikulas, the king and his party were very much satisfied with the beauty of the cottages and hermitages. It is stated here, Pashan Ashrama Sampada. The great sages had no skyscrapers, but the hermitages were so beautiful that the king was very much pleased at the sight. So, continuing with this very amazing story. And it's amazing in many ways because it appears like it's just some ordinary dealings between, two families, One person turns up with his daughter, I want you to marry my daughter, and the other guy says, yeah, sure, I'll accept. But that's not what it's all about. That's not what the motivation is here. We see, as we see this story developing, and we can go forward and we can go back. If you go backwards in the story, we'll see that around about verse 10, verse 12, Kardama Muni accepts the offer. Actually, I think it's verse 15, where Kardama Muni accepts the offer of Devahuti as his bride or wife to be, and he said, "Yes, I will, but as soon as she has children, I'm going to go back to my spiritual practices." He said, "There's one condition: I'll go back to my spiritual practices." So this was his main motivation, was to go back to his spiritual practices. And you see when Swayambhuva Manu, and understand who Swayambhuva Manu is. He's the emperor of the entire world, the entire universe. He's a big shot, right? And it's not like he's going, I remember there was a nursery rhyme when I was a child, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie, and the king was in the counting house. What was he doing? He was counting up his money, And so, for big people these days, important people, money is really important to them. Money is how, you'll see in this day and age also, if someone has a lot of money, they're respected. But if someone has no money, they're disrespected. But we see when Swayambhuva Manu, who's the emperor of the world, he goes back to Brahmavati, his capital, and what does he do? He engages in devotional service. He sits down on a simple mat of kusha grass, just a grass mat, not even a fancy cloth mat or anything like that, and he engages in worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this helps us to understand the caliber of these persons, is their focus in life was not making money, not trying to further their material prosperity, because they understand how things function. They understand that it's all driven by the laws of karma. If you're destined to be wealthy, you will be wealthy no matter what you do. It's just like Krishna explains to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, after Arjuna sees that all his dearly beloved relatives are arrayed on the other side of the opposing army, and he doesn't want to fight them. He doesn't want, because he knows he's supposed to kill them, and he doesn't want to do that. And so he says to Krishna, I want to go live in the forest. I don't want to fight. And what does Krishna say? He says, no, but your nature is you're a Kshatriya. You will have to fight. It's your nature, and you can't suppress your nature. And so we see these personalities, they understand that they have a particular nature, and they understand that all these things come due to their karma, due to guna and karma. And this is also pointed out in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains to Arjuna, he says, Yam 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 vapi smaram bhavet chatyat yante karevaram tangtam eva kunteya sadatad bhava bhavita. According to one's, what you remember at the time of death, and according to the particular modes of nature that affect you, I think that's explained in the next verse, then one takes birth in a particular body. You get a particular body. Along with that body, there's the influence of one's nature, meaning guna, how the modes of nature affect you, and also the karma. Whatever you've done in your past life will bring about what happens to you in this life, or what suffering you go through and what happiness you experience. It's all predetermined. Yet we see, it's kind of interesting, because in Vedic culture, we don't see here that Karma Muni is endeavoring to get enjoyment. We don't see that Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, is endeavoring to get enjoyment. It comes of its own accord because it's their karma. Yet we see in the society we live in, the whole society, I don't know if anyone here watches television or reads newspapers, there's so much advertising. And the advertising is all about trying to increase your standard of enjoyment. But we'll see that some people, as a classic example, are born in very poor families. And some people are born into very rich families. What determines that? Is it just chance? Is it just like, something that just happens to certain people and there's no way of determining? No, it's due to a person's karma. It's due to what pious or impious activities they perform in their previous life. That determines where they go in this life. And so we see this is very much the case here, where Swayambhuva Manu, a great personality, actually Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarupa, if we go back, I can't remember what number chapter it is, might be 14 or 15, maybe it's earlier than that, Brahma's prayers for creative energy. And he was looking at how to propagate or populate the universe. And as he was contemplating how he was going to do that, Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa just appeared from his body. And so in one sense they're expansions, or sometimes considered to be children of Brahma. But they're not ordinary personalities, and even Brahma, definitely not an ordinary personality. His intellect, his particular guna is very, very elevated. He's very strongly influenced by the mode of goodness. And so we see here how, and it's also, for me, it's quite remarkable in this story. And again, comparing it and contrasting it to the modern times, when Devahuti, so Swayambhuva Manu had two sons, Priyavrata or Uttanapadi had three daughters, Devahuti, Akuti, Prasuti. And so Devahuti was listening to Narad Muni talking about sages. And then she heard Narad Muni describing Karma Muni, and she fell in love with him, gave her heart to him on the spot, just by hearing the description. Just like we see, there's a well-known pastime with Krishna, where Rukmini, she was hearing the Brahmana describing Krishna, and she just gave her heart to him at that moment. So, obviously we can see the power of the sages, the words of the sages, and how he's describing Karma Muni, but also we can see the simplicity and the purity of the ladies at that time, where they were very much, they'd hear something from a great sage and they accept it as being the truth. And especially someone like Narad Muni. Narad Muni is not an ordinary personality. And I remember Sri Prahlad and myself one day were having this discussion in the Bhagavatam about Narad Muni. And he appears in almost every canto of the Bhagavatam. I think there's one canto he's not there. I can't remember which one it is. It might be the 12th, I'm not sure. And we'll see how Narad Muni is like a great orchestrator. At different times, when, for instance, right in the beginning of the 10th canto, when Krishna was about to appear in the womb, then I think it was the 8th child that Devaki would be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and would be the death of Kamsa. So Kamsa came to kill the first child. Actually, what happened, I think, he was going to kill the child, but then then Vasudeva convinced him, but it's not the first child, it's the 8th child they have to worry about. So Narad Muni saw, okay, Kamsa just, okay, fine, well, bring me the 8th child. And so then Narad Muni was saying, well, this will take a long time, if it's just like naturally going from one child to the next to get up to the 8th child. So he went and saw Kamsa and he said, but that's just an unembodied voice. How can you trust this? You don't know. It could be any of these children. And so what happened then was Kamsa killed every child. And it's not that Narad Muni had some evil motive. His motive was to accelerate the appearance of the Lord. And so we see how Narad Muni, he often does this in various circumstances. He facilitates the Lord's appearance. And he also facilitates very many wonderful pastimes, Prachara Bahesha, and so many different wonderful pastimes, Dhruva Maharaj. He facilitates their coming to Krishna consciousness in very, very wonderful ways. So very, very powerful personality. So he was speaking to Devahuti, and Devahuti heard about the qualities and the beautiful features of Karma Muni, and she fell in love with him. And then she described this to her mother, and her mother said, yes, you must marry this person. And so, because both his wife and his daughter were determined that she should marry Karma Muni, then Swayambhuva Manu arranged it. And it's very interesting because here we see that Karma Muni was just a simple sadhu living in a thatched cottage in the forest. By modern perspective, he would just be a beggar. And then we have the emperor of the world, the richest person on the planet, the most powerful person on the planet, is coming to bring his daughter to such a person. I just couldn't imagine it happening in this day and age. Because, and there's many reasons, because as we see is often the case in our modern time, things are very much judged based on externals. If a person's got money, if a person dresses nicely, if they look nice, they must be a good person. If someone's very attractive, so everyone is drawn to that person, but they have no idea of what their nature is like. They could be like the most horrible person you've ever met, but just because they look attractive, people are drawn to them. So very much based on externals, not based on the person's quality. But we see here, and this is described earlier on in this chapter, how Devahuti was drawn by his knowledge, by his spiritual prowess, or by his spiritual sort of advancement, and by his beauty. And so she was drawn by his qualities, not necessarily, not so much by his external nature. And this is something that's very, very important in Vedic culture, is to understand the nature of a person. And as we see, everything has lakshana, or symptoms. And you can judge a thing, as Prabhupada would often say, palena parachiyate, you judge the thing by the result. So it's not like you just look at something. Of course, someone who's advanced, especially in physiognomy, they can look at someone's face and understand the nature of a person. But in this day and age, it's not so common that someone can understand. Some people can, but it's not so common that they can understand a person's nature by looking at them. And usually, if they find someone who's very attractive, then they're drawn to that person. They want to enjoy. And this is a point that Sita brought out very nicely in yesterday's class, where we see in the modern society, everything is based around the personal, or our personal enjoyment, our personal sense gratification, and what we can get out of the situation to our benefit. Whereas we see in Vedic culture, the whole purpose of Vedic culture, and we see, Krishna talks about it in the 4th chapter of the Gita, Chaturvana Maya Shishtam, the Varnashram. The whole purpose of Varnashram is to elevate a person's consciousness from a low consciousness to a higher consciousness, where they come to the point of serving Krishna. And so this is the focus of Vedic culture, is to bring one to the point of serving Krishna, because this is understood to be the purpose of life, the goal of life. What it says, Anta Narayana Smriti. At the end, we should be remembering Narayan, or Krishna. So this is the whole purpose of our existence. And As Lord Chaitanya points out, he says, Jivera Supahoy Krishnera Nitras, Krishnera Tatasta Shakti Beda Bed Prakash. Because the living entity's nature is Tatasta Shakti. It means, Krishna has three Shaktis. He has his external energy, he has his marginal potency, he has his internal potency. And external energy refers to, matter, all these types of things. This is all the external potency. And then the Tatasta refers to the jivas, because we're somewhere in between. It means marginal. It's just like if you could, Prabhupada sometimes would give the example of that space of the beach, which is between the low tide mark and the high tide mark. That's the Tatasta. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry. Yeah? And that's what it's like for us. And then you have the internal or the spiritual potency, which consists of Krishna's energies, such as Radharani and Subhadra and the different Yoga Maya, the different potencies Krishna has. And so being in the position of Tatasta, just like, Prabhupada, this high tide, low tide area is quite a good analogy, because sometimes you see that area on the beach is dry, sometimes it's covered. So in the same way with us, sometimes we're influenced by the material energy, sometimes we're influenced by the spiritual energy, just depending on where we put our focus. So one who's in the, being in the position, we're all in the position of Tatasta, but being in the position of Tatasta, we can easily be influenced by material nature, or we can easily be influenced by spiritual nature. So it's just a matter of what we choose to do. And so this is the position of every living entity in this material world, is they have this capacity, it is their innate capacity to be a servant of God. The Vedic culture is about awakening this capacity, because as we see in this material world, most people are completely covered over. They're thinking that I am this body, this is me, I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. This is this mentality Krishna highlights in the 16th chapter of the Gita, where he says, Ishwaraham aham bhogi siroham balavam sukhi. That I am the controller, Ishvara, I am the controller. Ishwaraham aham bhogi, I am the enjoyer. Ishwaraham balavam sukhi, that I am powerful. Bala means powerful, strength. Sukhi, and I am happy. Very, very interesting verses there. And we see that this is the nature or the consciousness of practically everyone in this material world, is they're thinking that they're the controller and enjoyer, and by their endeavors they will enjoy so much more in this material world. And they make so much endeavor, yet we see so much suffering comes as a result of that endeavor. And you don't have to look very, very hard to see how much suffering is going on in this material world. Just watch the news for a few minutes, it's just like laden with suffering. And this is the situation of all living entities in this material world. And as I was saying before, this suffering is predetermined. No one goes looking for suffering unless they're a crazy person, isn't it? Does anyone here look for suffering? But it comes, and you can't stop it. It's just like, especially as you get older, you'll notice like, your knees are hurting, your back is hurting, this is hurting, that is hurting. You don't go looking for it, it just comes. This is the nature of this material. You have and you'll see that some people, they suffer very, very harshly in this life. Some people don't suffer very much at all. I was just in Vrindavan for a few weeks, and I spent a lot of time with some senior devotees, particularly Shruti Kirti. I'm trying to convince him to come here. He's a really nice devotee. He knows so many, because he was with Prabhupada for 18, 19 months or something like that. And so he has so many wonderful stories about Srila Prabhupada. So I'll be seeing him down in Melbourne. I'm trying to convince him to come here for a few days and give a few classes about Srila Prabhupada. But like someone like him, he's actually quite healthy. He's in his 70s. Or I have a friend in Melbourne, Dave Amrita, and he just, when we were in Mayapur in January, he turned 80. And he's still quite sprightly and energetic, whereas you look at most people who are in their 80s, they're kind of like, pooped, they're done. So we see, according to karma, one is going to suffer in this life. It's not like you can, it's not like you can arrange how much you're going to suffer and how much you're going to enjoy in this life. It's already predetermined. And we'll see here with these great personalities, they're not trying to further their enjoyment. They're just trying to serve Krishna. and whatever the due comes of its own accord. So it's a very, very, wonderful understanding. And the other thing that I wanted to point out here was if you see, like the very first thing that Prabhupada says in the translation, or he puts in the translation, after asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch mounted his chariot with his wife and started for his capital. So he didn't just go, okay, see you later, I'm going. He asked him, because he saw him, and this is part of the Vedic culture also, is how every varna, every ashram has its role within the culture. And so the brahmanas were generally considered to be the head of society, because the head is for thinking. That's where the brain power is. That's where you focus. And so the brahmana is the head, and the brahmanas are meant to give spiritual direction. Now, there's different classes of brahmanas, and Prabhupada talks about this in a purport elsewhere in this chapter. And there are brahmanas who are not focused on spiritual life, and there are brahmanas who are focused on spiritual life. So obviously, Kadamba Muni, he's a brahmana who's focused on spiritual development, and he's guiding Swayambhuva Manu spiritually. And we see this in the previous chapter particularly. He gave Swayambhuva Manu quite important instructions about his spiritual evolution. And this is the point of a brahmana. This is what a brahmana is meant to be doing. Because brahmana, the word brahmana means one who knows Brahman. And just knowing Brahman, that's okay, but you're meant to share that knowledge with others, otherwise you become a kripana or a miser. And so the point of having knowledge is to share it with others. And this is like, okay, we might study Prabhupada's books, but then what do? You don't just keep the knowledge yourself, you're meant to share that knowledge. And that's the mood of our mission, is that this, what do they call it? Goshtinandi, is to share the knowledge, to give it to others. And this is very much, you look at all the different acharyas in our line, like Prahlad Maharaj, this is very much his mood. Kunti, very much her mood. And of course, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Gokul Babaji, Jagannath Das, all these acharyas are going all the way back to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's very much their mood. And this is our line, the Gaudiya line. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he traveled all over India. There's so many amazing pastimes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Lord Chaitanya meeting with people, like the Prakashananda Saraswati and the Mayavadi Sannyasis, or Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, or Ramananda Roy. He's meeting with these people all the time, the Sanadiya Brahmana. He's meeting with these people and giving them Krishna consciousness, giving them the absolute truth. So this is very much our line. And we'll see, the Brahmanas, there are, different classes of Brahmanas, and so Kadamba Muni is a Brahmana who's a Goshtinandi. He's giving transcendental knowledge. And this is the function of the Brahmanas, to give transcendental knowledge, but also the function, and this way the Brahmanas protect the Kshatriyas because they keep them on the path, the spiritual path they're meant to be following. And the Kshatriyas, so the Brahmanas protect the Kshatriyas spiritually, but the Kshatriyas protect the Brahmanas physically, because the chat means to hurt, and trayate means to protect. So the idea is the Kshatriya is meant to protect the citizens from harm. Therefore, they are very skilled in martial arts. They have to practice their martial arts and things like that. And they need to be quite strong. And so there's a mutual relationship that's there between the Kshatriyas and the Vaishnavas, and the Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas. And there's this mutual respect because they each understand the role. It's not like the Brahmana looks at the Kshatriya and sees all his jewelry and his gold refineries and all this sort of stuff and becomes envious. Oh, geez, why don't I have that? Why am I just living in a simple thatched cottage? Not like that. Because for him, that's just a burden. And we see there's so many examples in the scriptures of wonderful yagas being performed. And the Brahmanas would come and do yagas, and the duty of the Kshatriya was to give them charity. So they'd give them silk clothes, they'd give them gold, they'd give them jewelry, they'd give them all this stuff. And generally the Brahmanas, the gold was too heavy to carry, so they just left it behind. They didn't want it, because it was just a burden to them. And also, if you have gold, you've got to protect it because someone will come and steal it, and they might kill you, and they just didn't want it. But the Kshatriyas gave in charity nonetheless, and they would just take the things they could practically use. Grains, cows, things like that, because the grains they're using
eating, they're using for yagya, the cows, they milk them, they make ghee, things like that. They can use those in their service to Krishna. And similarly, the Kshatriyas would not envy, just like we see here, how Swayambhuva Manu, he's leaving the Rishikula, as it's called, and he's appreciating the beauty of the environment. But he's not envying, oh, gee, I wish I could live like that. No, because he understands this is not my role. My role is to lead the citizens. My role is, the point is also here is they were happy in what they were doing and not always hankering for something they didn't have or lamenting what they've lost. And Krishna talks about this also in the Gita. This is not their nature because they're actually cultured people. They accept, okay, this is the duty I'm meant to follow, and they're happy doing it. And we see ultimately that because of this cooperation between the Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas, how society would prosper. And this is also a very important duty of the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, is they have to understand how to act so everyone can prosper. It's not like the Kshatriyas' only business was to squeeze taxes out of people and put them in jail and do stuff like that and just torment people they didn't like. That's not the Kshatriyas' business. The Kshatriyas' business was to protect people so that they could prosper in whatever their Varna and ashram is. And the ultimate purpose of that prospering is to come to the point of God consciousness. And so you'll see in the 4th canto, I think it is, the story of Vena Maharaj. So when Vena was quite, before he became the king, when his father went to the forest, you saw how the rogues and thieves were just, it describes in the Bhagavatam how there was always clouds of dust on the horizon because these bands of rogues and thieves were marauding around the place. But when Venu came in, he curbed them down, he punished them and stopped this type. Although Venu was a bit of an irreligious ruler, but still he curbed down the rogues and thieves, and it describes in a purport there how when the rogues and thieves prosper, then the Vaishyas and others don't feel safe to do their duty because they're worried they'll be plundered by these rogues and thieves. So therefore, they tend to hide their wealth, hide their riches. So it's a very scientific arrangement. And the reason it works, as Krishna says in the Gita, is Chakdavana Mayasya. He says, I've given this, I've established this. So this is Krishna's system. And if we're able to follow Krishna's system, it will help us to prosper in our life, both materially and spiritually. Not just materially, but spiritually also. Because Krishna has set up this system so that all categories of men and women can actually develop materially and spiritually and to be peaceful in life and ultimately come to the point of developing God consciousness and returning to the spiritual realm. This is the whole point of Varnashram. And this is, this wonderful example is being given here for us to understand the qualities that a transcendentalists have. And it's interesting because in the 5th canto, I think it's the 12th chapter, there's a nice verse there, Yashasti Bhakti Bhagavati Kinchana, Savai Gunais Tatra Samasate Sura, Harava Bhakta Shokuto Mahadguna Maratena Siddhavato Bihi. This is Prahlad Maharaj speaking to the residents of Harivash. And he mentions, he describes that for one who's taken to the service of Krishna, all the qualities of the demigods, they manifest in the body of that person. So we see here how both Manu and Karmamuni, they have so many wonderful qualities, and this is because of their practice of bhakti. And just like we see in our practice of devotional service, just like there's many devotees here engaged in deity worship. And if you look at deity worship, what's going on in deity worship, it's not just we're performing some rituals. These rituals are actually the culture of the spiritual world. It's like when for instance, when Giriraj is worshipped, he's offered 16 items of worship. And it starts with the first thing that he's offered is a seat. Please sit down. Idam asam. Yeah? Then the next thing he's offered is sweet words. Swagatam, suswagatam. Su means like sweet or exotic. So the idea is you welcome the person, you make them feel comfortable, you make them want to stay there. So then you can offer them some kind of worship. And the idea is you offer them worship, and that person will either give you blessings, benedictions, or give you spiritual direction. And so we see the whole process of deity worship is about teaching us the culture of the spiritual world. And sometimes, you hear people criticize, oh yeah, but it's so much Aishvarya, it's so much rules and regulations. That's the purpose of that is because our minds are unbridled, our senses are uncontrolled, and we have this tendency just to be drawn by whatever is attractive to the senses. So the idea with the rules is to try to control our minds so we can focus on Krishna. And so this is the whole purpose of the spiritual process, is to come to this point where we can exclusively focus on Krishna. And this is exactly what Kadama Muni and Swayambhuva Manu are doing. Kadama Muni says, yes, I'll marry your daughter, I'll give her children, and then I'm going back to my spiritual practice. Swayambhuva Manu, he goes home. The first thing he does, he sits down and he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thank you for arranging such a nice husband for my daughter. Everything for them is focused around the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the reason these stories are here is because this is instructing us, this is what we need to be doing. If we want to become happy, if we want to become successful in life, this is what we need to do. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions at all?
Thank you for the class. You talked about in this material world there is suffering and we experience suffering, but the point of Krishna consciousness is when we surrender to Krishna, it alleviates suffering. I don't know what my question was, but could you expand on that, please?
Rupa Goswami, he explains in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I think it's the first chapter. I can't remember the verse. Maybe someone here can help me with the verse. But that when you come to devotional service, there's three main stages. There's sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, prema bhakti. Of course, they have all these subdivisions in there. Sadhana bhakti brings two things automatically. It brings relief from suffering and auspiciousness. Kleshagni, what's the... Subhada means auspiciousness, Kleshagni. Agni means suffering. Kleshagni means you get free from suffering. Then as you evolve, as you derive the perception of liberation, because oftentimes liberation, the devotees think, it means you go back to the spirit. No, it just means you become free from reactions of karma. It's not very elevated. We don't want that. We want to go back to Godhead. So one derides the conception of liberation. And what's the other one in Bhava? You remember? Rarely achieved. Isn't that the last one? Okay. Anyway, I can't remember the six. Some verses I've struggled to learn for years. I can never get them. This is one of them. I can never get them. And then in the last one, it's it is rarely achieved. That's right. And then it's the last one. It's the means to please Krishna, and Sandaranda Visheshatma. It's like it's I can't remember. Sorry, I can't remember. But yeah, it's so. Rupa Goswami explains this, how just by taking to the practice of bhakti, your life becomes auspicious. I mean, I remember what my life was like before I joined, ISKCON, and I was on the verge of a heroin addiction. I was pretty close to that, and I had this experience when I was in Sydney. And I went to the Rath Yatra there, and I was staying with some people I'd met at a festival, not an ISKCON festival, just another type of festival, and so I was wearing kanti mala at the time, and I just taken some drugs, and I was in the shower, and my kanti mala broke. And that was like, for me, that was like, even though it's just an insignificant thing, it's just everything breaks in this material world, But at that time, it really hit me. It's like, no, I have to stop this, taking drugs. And that really affected me. And so, by Krishna's mercy, I had this awareness. I wouldn't call it a realization at that point. I had this awareness of what the intoxication was doing to me, and because of that happening, I just gave it up. And so, it brought auspiciousness into my life. And I was definitely suffering. And even though the suffering hasn't stopped, but at least now I have more awareness of what the suffering is about and why it happens, and I can see how different people have different karma, and we suffer according to our karma, but also we also understand that the suffering by Krishna's mercy, because Krishna doesn't like to see his devotees suffer, but he also wants to see us learn. He wants to see us evolve spiritually. And sometimes because we're less intelligent, and I'm definitely speaking for myself here, because we're less intelligent, that we need to suffer to learn. We're trying to enjoy the body, we're trying to enjoy our material situation, because everything, we're living here in like a subtropical paradise. It's such a beautiful place, or like, you go to a place like Hawaii. Has anyone ever been to Hawaii? It's amazing. It's such a beautiful place. It's like, Prabhupada would say sometimes that he said, everywhere on this earth is hell, but if anywhere is nice, it's Hawaii. Yeah. And it's like that. Hawaii is a really beautiful place. But what we find in Hawaii is it's very difficult for people to practice devotional service there. They have a temple there, they've had a temple there for years, and there's always constant fighting and politics. People just, because they're living in such a nice material environment, it's really hard to progress spiritually. So this is part of the reason why we suffer, is Krishna's just reminding us here that, you cannot enjoy in this material world. You get some little bit of enjoyment, but nothing like we'll get in the spiritual realm. In the spiritual, like Vaikuntha means the place where there's no kunta, there's no anxiety. Vai means free from, no anxiety, no suffering. But in this material world, it's just like, there's so much anxiety, so much suffering. It's just like, if you walk around at night here, you better have a torch with you. Why? Because there's likely going to be a Death Adder on the road. I've experienced that myself. I just remember a few years back, I was walking up the road here, and I thought, there's something on the road, and I flashed my torch, and there's this Death Adder there. So, everything in this material world is covered by some kind of nastiness. Everything. Little or great, it's all different. So the suffering we get in this material world as devotees is just to remind us where we are. Don't become comfortable here. It's not a place to become comfortable in. We need to understand what our situation is. We're forced into birth. We're forced into disease. We're forced into old age. And we're forced into death. You can't stop that. That's what the common kind of background in this world, if you like, is you have to go through these four changes. So when we suffer, we should see this as a reminder. And what's that verse? Samashutiye palavapalam mahatpatam punyo yashamara bhavamburi vachapadam padam yavipadam natesham. It's describing, Prabhupada quotes this in the 12th chapter of the Gita. And in there he mentions that, the attitude of the devotee is, I'm suffering because of my own past misdeeds, but Krishna, out of his kindness, has reduced these things to a token. And then he goes on, he says something really, really struck me. He says, therefore, it is better to suffer than to protest. Because we understand this is coming to me because of what I've done in the past. Don't blame anyone else. Don't complain to anyone about it. Just tolerate it. And understand why it's there. And with this understanding, then we're able to move away from this desire, capacity, whatever you want to call it, to enjoy the material nature, and understand this is why I'm here, is because I'm trying to exploit this material nature. And if I can give up this exploitation of material nature, then I'll be able to return back to the spiritual realm. Yeah? Anything else? Ramesh Prabhu.
So you touched on that pastime with Narada Muni helping to accelerate the birth of children from Vasudeva and Devaki.
Yeah.
So once it became clear to Vasudeva and Devaki that Kamsa was going to kill each of their children, why did they keep having children?
Good question. I don't know.
Oh,
The Acharyas don't, as far as I'm aware, the Acharyas don't comment on it.
I've never heard anything about it either, but it's always kind of mystified me.
I mean, you know, it's often the case with great devotees like that, is they understood what their role was, what their part was to play. And so their role was to, or their part to play was to bring Krishna and Balaram into the world. So, but as I said, I haven't read any commentary from the Acharyas, but it would be likely something like that, I would guess. And I'm only guessing because I don't know. I've never read. Yeah. And it's kind of like, there's one place in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I think, where I think it's talking about Vrindavan Das Thakur's mother, Narayani, and it doesn't mention the name of her husband or his father. And Prabhupada says there, he says, because it doesn't mention the name of the father, we can understand it's not important. So that's generally my tendency when the Shastras or the Acharyas don't describe a particular thing, then I just say, well, it mustn't be that important. Otherwise, if it was important for us to know, they'd mention it. That's all I can.
I'm certainly not the first person to have wondered, I'm sure.
I'm sure you're not. I'm sure you're not. Okay. Thank you very much to the Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Thank you, sir.